Hello and welcome to Carson Attempts One New Technique at a Time. Today I'm recreating the sweater that Bill Yates is wearing in this iconic photo shoot. I will not be recreating the stain on the sleeve. If you haven't seen my Victorian cycling sweater video, go check that out. I talk more about the sweater there. These photos were taken in 1985, so the sweater would have been made at around the same time. This is clearly machine knit. The sleeves and the body are an English rib. The yoke is an English rib racking pattern. There's no shoulder shaping, there's no armhole shaping, it's just a couple of rectangles and some trapezoids for the sleeves. The interesting thing, however, is that this has to be a cut and sew neckline. When you're doing a racking pattern, the needles move past each other. So you can't put one shoulder into hold while you work on the other one. The needles would keep the bottom bed from moving. You could, theoretically, take the whole thing off on waste yarn and then rehang one sleeve at a time, but that's going to be a big pain with a double bed pattern and tuck. So I'm going to walk you through how to make this sweater and do a cut and sew neckline. As always, this pattern is available on my website. There's a link in the description. It's a pattern generator, so you need a few measurements and a gauge swatch, and it will generate a custom pattern for you, so you can make a sweater for any sized person on any knitting machine with any kind of yarn. I'm using 3-ply astracryl for this in off-white on my Brother 910 standard gauge knitting machine. There's a link to the yarn in the description. Let's get started. The body panel starts with 2 inches of ribbing. I like to cast onto waste yarn because it creates a nicer finish. I'm knitting 22 rows here. The body of the sweater is a half cardigan stitch. On the Brother machine, that means tuck in one direction on one bed. And this continues forever. I like to watch the stitches tuck every other row. Leave a yarn marker at the underarm. For me, that's row 265, and then keep knitting. The yoke is a racking pattern. I wanted my yoke to be 5 inches, so I started at row 325. Set your bottom bed to half pitch. Don't change any of the carriage settings. Knit 2 rows. Turn the racking handle 1 click to the right. Knit 2 more rows, and then 1 click to the left. Repeat this step, moving back and forth every 2 rows. This continues until row 436. There's no shoulder shaping, so transfer all the stitches to the main bed and bind off around the gate pegs. Here's my body panel. We need 2 of these knit exactly the same way. To avoid a wonky neckline, we need to block these pieces. I'm working with acrylic, so I just threw mine in the wash. If the pieces aren't at their final size, our measurements will be off. Here's one of my body panels. This one's going to be the back because it's got some minor imperfections, so I thought I would start here. This is the front side. So on the back, you want to find the center. I'm just going to fold it in half. Mark it. This is a disappearing fabric pen. And then now that I know my center is here, which you can barely see, I'm going to measure out 3 1/4 inches. I'm going to measure out 3 3/4 inches from that center mark. Which is right there. And then 3 3/4 is right there. And then I'm going to measure down 1 inch for the back. Okay, right about there. Now I'm going to draw a curve that is roughly symmetrical, and that will be where I cut the neckline. I'm going to use a French curve for this, but you really don't have to. It just makes life easier. So I have my curve drawn for the back neckline, and it's roughly symmetrical. And now I'm going to take it over to the serger and just serge right above this line. I did a couple tests on swatches to make sure that my machine settings were set in a way that it wouldn't stretch out the fabric, and I think we're in good shape here. There we go, back neckline. Here is the front piece. Mark it. Here it is. Out 3 3/4 inches. And over here. And then for the front, we're measuring down 3 inches. And then again with the French curve. Ta-da! Seam 1 shoulder. Then we're going to pick up stitches from the neckline to create a finished edge. The pattern will tell you exactly how many you need. I like to get the stitches on either end and then one on either side of the shoulder seam. It's not going to sit in the exact middle because the front neckline is longer than the back. Then just pick up a stitch in the middle and try to get them evenly along the edge. You want to go just under the line of stitching. This doesn't need to be perfect, just try to make it even. When you have the whole neckline, bring all the needles out into hold so they'll knit more easily. You're going to want to close the latches so they don't catch on the line of stitching. Get your sweater out of the way and then hang some weights. Then knit 1 row. Go slowly, this might be a struggle. A few of my needles didn't knit, but this is an easy fix. Now it's time to switch to ribbing. I'm using a transfer tool to shove the selvage between the 2 beds so it doesn't get in the way. Transfer every other stitch to the bottom bed. Then knit 3 inches of ribbing. Go slowly on the first few rows to make sure that everything is knitting correctly and your weight is in the right place. When you're done, transfer everything back to the main bed. And then knit 1 row. Pull out a long tail for sewing this down later, and then take the whole thing off on waste yarn. Here's my neckline. Now we're going to sew it down. It's really easy to get lost while you're doing this, so I like to safety pin the ribbing down in a few places. Trace a rib up to the top stitch and then pin it in place. Sewing down the neckline is a lot like a Kitchener stitch. Pick up a loop from the sweater below the line of stitching and then go through an old live stitch and then a new live stitch. Pick up a loop, old stitch, new stitch. This continues all the way on to the end. Pull off the waste yarn and check to make sure you didn't miss any stitches. After seaming the other shoulder, it's time to measure the sleeve length. Put your half's finished sweater on, see where the shoulder hits you, and then measure down to your wrist. Plug this value into the pattern generator. The sleeves start with 2 inches of 1x1 ribbing. Then we're going to knit half cardigan stitch up to the top with increases every few rows. Increasing ribbing is a 2-row process. First, pick up the last 2 stitches on the top bed and move them over 1 needle. Pick up a purl bump to fill the empty needle, and then move the bottom stitch over 1. Knit 1 row, and repeat the process. Move the top needles over 1, move the bottom needle over 1, and this time pick up a purl bump to fill the empty needle. Now we're back in the 1x1 configuration. When you get to the top of the sleeve, transfer all of the stitches to the main bed and take it off on waste yarn. You'll need 2 of these knit exactly the same way. Now let's attach the sleeves. With the right side facing you, hang the body section back on the main bed between the armhole markers. The pattern will tell you how many stitches you need here. I like to grab 1 stitch on either side of the shoulder seam and then get the outside stitches. Then just pick up stitches evenly from there. With the wrong side facing you, re-hang the sleeve's live stitches over your body panel. Then grab some yarn and bind off around the gate pegs. This might be a bit of a struggle. Here's the sleeve. Do the same thing on the other side. Then pull off the waste yarn and seam up the sides and the sleeves. Here's the sweater washed and blocked. Mine turned out a comfy, oversized sweater, and the neckline is perfect. This was a lot easier than manually shaping the neckline. I might do this more often. I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you have any questions or requests, please leave them in the comments and I'll see what I can do to help. Like and subscribe for more machine knitting tutorials. Happy knitting!